So when we're thinking about value propositions, we like to think about mainly three things. What is the problem you're solving? Who are you solving it for? And I really like this last one is what will give you an unfair advantage? So typically you would talk about features that are unique to you, but there might be features that many companies or many digital initiatives will have. So it's worth thinking about what will be the envy of the competition, what will give you an unfair advantage, because that really puts you in you really have to think about, okay, where is the value? And that is something you need to pin down. I think that question is, what have you got any reflections about sort of that way of thinking about a value proposition?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have.
That's Cod right? I'm not going to say the name of the company again, that's for sure.
I will hopefully manage, because I don't want to drink that. I think it's really important to, because I've experienced many times starting these projects without a proper value proposition, and you tend to just go in very multiple directions, back to kind of the elephant of you just spend too much time because you're not really aligned, because you don't really have the baseline for what you're actually doing. So I think it's really important, and doesn't have to be advanced, like something big. It can just be like a one-pager of that just guides you in the right direction. It's the groundwork that you need to start. So I think a value proposition is really important to have.
I think you should be able to explain it in a sentence.
Yeah.
We do this for these people, and we do it this way. That is completely unique.
And then you can take that and build on that as well, because it's like, what types of questions do you want to ask? It's like, well, how do you want to dig down into, like, for example, who are you solving it for? Our biggest challenge in the recent companies I've been to was that we're solving something for people who actually don't know that they have a problem. So we struggle to work with, usually you work with personas and typical users, and we've struggled with that because we couldn't pinpoint. They didn't really exist as it's this person with this title, and so we couldn't use that. So you'd kind of have to figure out, but these things here help you to kind of go deeper down and nail those. What type of questions are you asking? What type of methods should we use? Because it's very easy. I've learned from many mistakes. It's very easy to just take one path because this worked somewhere else, and this should work here too. But we learn.
And then we are at something that is kind of dear to the way we run the unnamed company, is to show people your vision. And here I have like something that I'm quite, that I think about a lot, that ugly does not mean fast. And what do I mean about that? People spend a lot of time on wireframes, mocking up huge systems, and they do it in a semi-abstract visual language. So when I'm talking about a wireframe, it's usually something that is either digitally or physically drawn with like basic lines and boxes where you, in your mind, have to fill out what's supposed to be in those lines and boxes.
Like very low fidelity sketching of concepts.
And what I like to think is that with the modern ways of working, you can do that, but with high resolution design just as fast. You don't really save any time by doing this low res wireframing, but you risk a lot because there's lots of good signs around that people really struggle to look at to understand future scenarios. And if you look at something abstract, they will take what they have in their head and color in those basic drawings, those wireframes, with whatever idea they have of what the product should be. And then you might achieve alignment, that everybody is aligned around the wireframes, and then spend 6 months in developing something. And when they see the actual solution, you realize that the alignment wasn't actually real. Because when you see it, you get that conversation that can cost so much money that people go, this is not what I had in mind. Yeah, but it's what we've talked about for the last 6 months, and we all agreed on the wireframe, or we all agreed on the mood boarding for it. Yeah, but it wasn't really what different stakeholders had in their mind, because it is humanly very difficult to think about future states. So that's why this kind of my something I come back to a lot is that, yeah, you don't need to do that step. Just do it high res. It can be just as fast, and you really get that conversation after a short amount of time, and it doesn't cost much to have that conversation then. But after 6 months of development, that conversation can be so expensive. The one conversation where people go, well, that's not what I thought we were making.
No, and I totally agree. We had so I see myself more as a kind of an architect of design, and it's hard to visualize something if you don't like. I worked with engineers and domain experts, and if I just draw like wireframes or kind of a flow chart, or I can visualize it, but it doesn't mean someone else can. So it's very efficient when you kind of work on a team to build some architecture, some structure, to understand how things connect, especially when you work a lot with data. But it's really hard to visualize that for a lot of people. So early on, when you're selling a concept, it's back to the common language. High fidelity designs tells so much more, but it also becomes like you have to use it's not just a high fidelity designs. It has to be correct, like has to be data that makes sense. So you can kind of demo something, a story that makes sense. But it is, I've had this, I wouldn't call it fights, but like I've had to fight for this internally in many companies, because it is, as you say, like people think that no, because you make something that looks good, it's slow, but it's actually not. Because I worked in instead of, like, for example, we worked for when I worked in Cogni, we had one design sprint successfully because we couldn't get a hold of stakeholders. So you spend actually maybe 2 years on something to iterate, which could have been done in just a few weeks, because it's so big, and it takes a lot. It goes back to the beginning. You said alignment. But so that it's just hard to it's hard internally to get those things through. But I think having a high fidelity designs and prototypes, you get back to having the common language, which actually it can get you into, is it a yes or a no? Is it forward? Is it backwards? Is that you can
even be a fail fast.
Yeah. I used to do the prototypes just to get a discussion. It was purely, I said they don't have to be correct. Don't care about the details. I just want to provoke the right discussion. Yeah,
I agree with that a lot. That is one of the great benefits of doing that. And but yeah, let's move on. We're running out of time. People often wonder, like, okay, so what does high fidelity design look like? Here is just an example of something done in 5 days. That is for this is hydropower. So it's a solution for sensors at a hydropower plant, and how you can visualize sort of the flow of water, which is power and money. And this is kind of the level I think you need to be at, and it's for people to have that conversation, to understand a common visual language. Because I think me and you, we could, do wireframing or user journeys with boxes and have stuff in our head, but that is a common misconception that everyone can do that. Everyone can't do that.
No,
is the fact. And then this, I think we can be a bit short about, but it's because this aligns a bit with what we were saying earlier. Like, don't create a monster. Don't try to solve all the problems at once. It just won't work. And rely on existing technology. Like, avoid the not created here syndrome, because even designers and developers or people who work in these companies, they are incentivized to develop stuff. That's what they make money on, and they want to make it internally. But there are lots of good off-the-shelf technologies that can be skinned or customized to your liking, and you should focus on, you know, what we said earlier, like what gives you an unfair advantage, and develop the heck out of that rather than.
Yeah, it's like you don't build a Ferrari if you don't really know if you need a car yet. You need to have something that, you know, in the beginning, it's to get you fast up and running.
Yeah, and even if you were building a car, you don't make the tires, you don't make the glass in the windows, you don't build everything yourself.
Nope.
You assemble technologies. And then testing and iterating is also something we can do, like we do, or this is an example of one of the Norway's largest banks who did a 5-day prototype and used it to test on focus groups. And you were saying earlier about when you do high fidelity design, and that the data is important. And I think that's such a good point, because if you've ever done testing on focus group, especially with engineers in the energy sector, if one number is wrong, they cannot see past it. Impossible. So you got to get all the numbers right. You got to like the data has to be convincing. It doesn't matter if your solution solves their problem. If some of the numbers are wrong, you're dead in the water.
Or worse, I was working in cybersecurity where we were testing on security specialists, and we spent an hour discussing one word.
Yeah.
Because we had changed the concept a bit, and so instead of testing it, we spent 1 hour discussing that one word.
so just try to get that right, and then you'll remove some friction from your own process. And then we always like to say, you should, once you have a solution up and running, you should show off results, because one of the last sort of hurdles in getting success with innovation in energy companies is adaptation. So kind of need to prove that it's working. And I think that's something that many people shy away from, or don't perhaps take seriously enough, is people sometimes think that they have the philosophy that, oh, if I build it, they will come. But they won't. They're quite happy working in Excel or whatever they're working in, because they've always done it that way. They don't want change. They don't want a better tool. They want control, and they've built years of their career on working this way in Excel, and they know this way of working. So you really gotta look at kind of the psychology of change to get people to adapt new tools, and some of that comes down to showing positive results, so that you get the sense of pride in the organization. Now we have achieved this together. We now have this tool that is the envy of the industry. We are proud of it. We want to adapt it.
I think that in general, like working with product development, is that the biggest job is actually implementing it internally. That's change management, which is, it's a different beast.
Yeah. And this is something, now we're on to the second part here. And I wanted to ask you, Lena, about this, because Mike and I, we interviewed our client, or the innovation management at this large Norwegian bank, about how she has created a culture of innovation in her corporate structure. And she says it's about creating a culture and a structure that can generate ideas, that can evaluate ideas, score them, prototype and test quickly, and even build MVPs then to be scaled into their digital solution. And they have a system for this. But with your experience, this is from banking, with your experience from energy, how do you create such a culture within companies that are not software companies? Because the producers on the continental shelf or internationally, they're not software companies. How do you like gather these ideas or pick like the right things to?
I think it's difficult with like it is definitely challenging. I think there's no lack of ideas. Like I think like I mostly work with the energy industry most of my career and in tech. And I would say the energy industry is one of the most innovative industries I've ever worked with, which I find fascinating and challenging. But they're also very conservative. So there's no lack of ideas. But I think also it's like, for example, it goes back to the alignment. If you don't kind of prioritize either like a team, like responsibilities to do it, it will never happen. So either you do build that internally in the company, like it could be, for example, like Aker BP has its own incubator, Eureka, internally, that just they spin off ideas. That's what they do.
So they created a rig.
Yeah,
to breed that kind of culture.
Yeah, we had it, for example, in Cognite, we were a tech company that worked with the energy companies. What was challenging there was like we had a big data platform that was challenging to innovate on because it was, you're building new features but it was built a new team. It was kind of an internal incubator again, which kind of we called it the beachhead team. We worked purely on innovating fast and new things, and we were allowed to be away from the noise, and because that's where it becomes, and just purely focus on that one task or that one idea that you have picked. This is what we're going to do. So I think that it has to be a priority.
Step aside from the politics.
Yeah, but also it's like if you already have a product, if you already have, in any energy company, like you're not a tech company, you're not a product company, so it's not your day-to-day. So you will never, like, for example, our biggest challenge was actually to get stakeholders because they're busy. Try to get a hold of someone who is out on a platform, who has like you're interviewing or talking with, like, but they have to run because something happens and it takes months to talk to them again. And the same in other, so that's not their main priority. So if you don't prioritize it or outsource it, it will take a long time because it needs to be more of a focus, where that's why they do these internal like incubators, or in some of the bigger companies at least, or they outsource.
And when we work with our clients, it is sort of we try to help them to look at what problems are they going to solve and who they're solving it for, like we talked about earlier, and also identify who are the gatekeepers, like the stakeholders, and involve them in it. Because if you don't involve your stakeholders, you might get stuck rather quickly. And then, like we talked about earlier, like what gives you the unfair advantage, and maybe try to pick 3 things that you think, okay, these 3 things are unique to us. This will really set us apart. And then we often draw that out in what we call like a golden user journey. So that is, it can even be a written piece. You can write how like Lena wakes up in the morning and then she does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And then that journey takes her through those 3 unique features that shows your value. And then that is sort of where we start when we want to do a high fidelity prototype. And Ed, I mean, I think now, if I've got this timing right, this is kind of the time where we should, maybe I should just mention that if anybody wants to reach out, you can have a free chat with us and Mike, who's also here somewhere, and just email me. And there's like a discount on the prototypes that we offer to anyone here or anyone in the E-FWD family. So yeah, sorry, Ed, does that timing work? Is that good timing for you to start the Q&A?
Yeah. I think that's set up very neatly. I mean, thank you so much for getting these sort of ideas kind of bubbling away, and we've got some we've got some questions already. So I mean, there's a couple of questions around sort of, I suppose, stakeholders and how to. I mean, Emma's asked what happens if you have stakeholders who can't agree on the value proposition, and Tim's asked a sort of a similar one about how you keep the sort of scope of work kind of tight enough while getting kind of wider stakeholders to buy in. So I suppose there's kind of like there's a sort of a related question there around what you're trying to do and how you sort of secure that sort of stakeholder support.
Okay, on the piece about stakeholders not agreeing, if you have a challenge with stakeholders that don't agree, I would say set them, try to get some time together and do a workshop. Look at, okay, what, like, do the basic things. What is the challenge? What are we trying to solve here? Because the more stakeholders you get in a room and you get them in really early, so they feel like they're part of the ideation, which, oh, sorry, Mike, I said ideation. They're part of creating the solution, they will become invested in it and more likely to like it later. If you leave them out of the initial phases, they are more likely to not agree with it later. That's my advice. And what would you say?
I think you will always, it's different, like stakeholders are, because there's many types of stakeholders. Some are more kind of invested than others, but it's about finding out what is the problem they want to solve. And there's always, there's a lot of opinions, even though, so it's just about listening. There's going to be opinions. Not everyone will.
But even the active listening is helps.
Yeah, but I think it's like my experience working, especially that helps also coming from the outside, is it's just listen and try to just understand their problems and try. It doesn't mean that they will solve it 100% for this specific stakeholder or that one, because nothing is perfect. But I think it's about just listen, try to understand what the issue is, and then maybe make them understand why this is a better solution than this one. Or I think it goes back to, listening and understanding.
What was your second question, Ed?
Well, I suppose it's I mean, so Tim's kind of questions kind of build on that kind of stakeholder question, and it's just about sort of keeping the scope tight while kind of getting wider stakeholders to buy in and getting to care about the whole elephant.
Yeah, I think keeping the scope tight is for me often a conversation you can have which begins with value. So when are we going to see any value from this tool or the thing we're doing? So okay, and you want it fast, right? People usually want the value fast. Then we really do need to limit the scope of the first, call it an MVP or the first version of this digital initiative. And I think that's a great tool for keeping the scope down, is to say that, okay, we believe in the modern way of developing software. We believe in getting something out there and iterating on it. And that means having a limited scope so that we can get this live in 6 months or whatever the deadline is. Because what is inevitable is that if you allow the scope to grow too much, you will find it really, really hard to deliver anything useful anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's also important to, it's very easy to get influenced by stakeholders. So it goes back to the listening and understanding, because it's very easy. Like I recently worked on a product where like it's a tool just both like strategic, tactical, operational. So it's supposed to kind of meet a lot of needs, and you have to be very clear on what you start with. So you can kind of try and draw the elephant, but you kind of have to prioritize. And it's very important that, yes, they are part of it, but like we were influenced by so many different stakeholders based on, no, I want it from my point of view, which is strategic, so I want this. Or I want it because I'm more operational, so I want this. I would say it's challenging. It's not easy, but it requires a lot of kind of navigation from, like, it's because again, it goes back, it's very easy if it's not led in
But the
their gut
priorities from the stakeholders, you will see change a lot as soon as something is live.
direction. Yes.
So the things that people say that, oh, we need to have this, or we gotta have that, or there's no value in it without this, might not be correct. And you won't know that until you have something live.
I suppose on a sort of a related note around sort of support, I think we sort of started off in my opening comments, sort of raising a question around failure, right? And I think obviously people, these things don't always go right. Obviously things don't work out as planned. What do you think is the price of failure? Like, how do you come back from failure? What do you need to kind of bounce back essentially when things go wrong? And I'm just gonna throw this out to the audience as well. Please, if there are questions out there, you can write questions in the chat box, or you can turn on your camera and speak out loud. But yeah, I mean, just think about the sort of the price of failure.
I think that's where a lot of the industry is that it has burnt itself, or many companies have been through some really expensive failures, and they are very aware of it, and they are really keen not to repeat it. And I think a key learning that anyone can take, no matter if you have been part of expensive failure or not, is that if you create something that's fast and lean and small and not too expensive, at least you fail fast. And that is way less painful than failing really expensively and slowly. So that's another great reason to keep the scope down, is that we have the best intentions in the world, but you might not, for whatever reasons, it could be politics, it can be anything, or it can be the world changing, you might not succeed. And that is just how it is. And then it is so much better if you kept the scope small, and something happens that is perhaps beyond your control, and it's a failure, but hey, at least we didn't make this huge thing out of it.
Yeah, I agree. That's because it is very common to do it. It's unfortunately, it's actually more common to do that.
To fail.
Yeah.
Or to go
We're like,
big.
no, we call it iteration.
It's good to know.
No, but like it's like I've worked on we made probably 3 versions of one product in 2 years, or no less, because we should have failed faster.
Yeah.
But you spend in these companies, you spend months instead of weeks, which it's expensive. So it's about daring, I think, daring to fail fast, because I think we talk about the same things, but it's about daring to do it, I think.
Yeah. And I think there's a sense also in the industry of like, okay, nobody ever got fired for buying a Dell, so let's just go with like Excel and whatever we have been doing. So I think there's like some people have been burned and are a bit scared, but that's not a good reason for like, okay, keep it lean, keep it small and fast.
You mentioned, I think it was Aker BP, who had the sort of in-house kind of innovation team, which sounds like a really interesting idea. I mean, I think is that a model that you see that is replicable? Should other companies be thinking about doing that? Is that something what's your assessment of it?
I mean, it depends on, like, Aker BP is it's the biggest private owned company in Norway. It has the money to do it. What they've done is that they've failed fast in there. They've just purely just tested and validated ideas. I'm not sure how many products successfully got out of it. I know one that was bought by Cognite. It was, but then it was killed again. But yeah, they did. They made a lot. I think what they do in a lot of, it's like Aker BP. I didn't know they do it in Equinor too. They call them use cases. They don't call them products. It's like, we're building a use case because we're trying to solve a problem, and it's very long term. And it's very niche. So they might build something just for one team or one, like they do that. But they also kind of have a vision of this being, that's what we collaborated as a, the cybersecurity company or Cognite, we collaborated with Aker BP on building something that could be sold to anyone. Like we worked on risk management and cybersecurity with Aker BP. But the goal was actually intentionally, because they actually said, we don't really want a one-off customization because we failed so many times because it's not managed, we just scrap it. We want something that is used by more people because then it will be developed, it will be maintained. So I don't think they've had very much success with it. But I think it's the right way to go if you want to actually create something. You need to have that focus, I think.
I suppose on the same kind of question around sort of repeatability, like do your ways of work, I mean, is it the same for every industry? I mean, obviously obviously there are, you talk about hydropower, talk about, sort of Aker BP, talk about, wind turbines, obviously lots of different companies doing different things in the energy space. Do the same set of rules apply for each of the different companies?
Kind of, I would say. So when I started in Cognite, the founder of Cognite always said is that if we can break the energy industry, like the oil and gas, which is like the most complex, we can do any industry. Because it's the most conservative, it's the most complex. And if we can break that one, we can break anyone because it's the hardest one to do.
But
but they are similar in a way. It's just it's a lot of data.
Yeah.
And it's high stakes.
Every industry kind of thinks that about themselves. So like you talk to the Aker BPs or Vol, which we work with, or 360 Energy, they say, oh yeah, but we're energy. This is really complex stuff. But it's not like when you go into the bank, they say, oh no, we're only banking. They don't. They go, oh no, we're banking. We're like, oh, we're the most serious of everyone. Like you can't just come around here and think you can do digital innovation. And it's kind of, I think every industry, at least every big industry, has this kind of notion that, oh yeah, but we're more complex than the others. The others are just like hairdressers, all of them, but they're not. They all have complexities. They all have their own engineers. They all have, but yeah, certainly it's a complex
it's
industry.
more of a, for example, if you look at that industry, we work with the people who do inspections and maintenance on platforms. They still today go out with pen and paper. So just having
I've prototyped a tool for that.
Yeah, we worked on an app, and we also did like the HoloLens and everything. But the threshold is so it's such a long-term game because you're changing. So I think what started with the digitalization in the energy industry is actually it's a generational shift. So we worked a lot with the people who worked in the industry for 30, 40 years to get their knowledge to build something so the next generation have tools and don't start with a pen and paper. So it's a bit more long-term game, and it's just a bigger beast. It's just as complex. If you work in healthcare, for example, they take security insanely serious, which is
we're doing a healthcare project next week with a healthcare startup, and I've also worked with the hospitals. And guess what? They say, Anna, we're more complex than we're healthcare. How important is that? And our systems, you can't touch anything. They're too complex. Too like so. Everyone has this notion.
No, but they're really hard because they take security and personal security of the data very seriously because it's sensitive data. So I think it's similar. It's like same but different.
Fantastic. I think that's probably a good note to end on. I want to say thank you to Andreas and Lena. I think really interesting ideas we've circulated, and I'm sure people can get in touch to follow up and have that one-to-one consultation. I'm sure we'll be seeing more innovation in this space. I'll be interested to see who follows the Aker BP model or not in terms of sort of driving that sort of innovation. So thank you so much to SmplCo for sharing your thoughts. Thank you to the audience for attending. I've been Ed Reed. Thank you and goodbye.